Hello everyone. Let's continue the very mysterious story The Open Window from It So Happened, Lesson 7, which was written by Hector Hugh Munro. In the first part of the video, we have seen that Vera is a very confident and smart 15-year-old girl. She tells Frampton Nuttall about the tragedy that happened to Mrs. Sappleton about 3 years ago, in which her husband and two younger brothers, along with a spaniel dog, lost their life and their dead bodies were never recovered. Now let's continue with the tragedy and read the story. Part 2. Mrs. Sappleton comes down at last and inadvertently confirms her niece's story. Inadvertently means accidentally or without any intention. This lady, Mrs. Sappleton, confirms that whatever her niece has told is correct. That her husband and two brothers went for a hunt and they never returned. And she's waiting for their return. Frampton tries to acquaint his host with the nature of his ailment. Acquaint means make someone aware. So he wants to make Mrs. Sappleton aware about the nature of his disease. Through the open window he can see things that worsens his nerves. So something happens. From the window he sees something and his condition gets worse. She broke off with a little shudder. Shudder means tremble. So she came hastily trembling. It was a release to Frampton when the aunt bustled into the room with a whirl of apologies for being late in making her appearance. Bustled, busy manner. And whirl means move rapidly. So she came with a lot of apologies for making him wait, for meeting him late. I hope Vera has been amusing you, she said. Amusing means provide entertainment. So indirectly she's showing that she's aware of the nature of Vera, how good she is in talking and making up stories and amusing people by her talk. She has been very interesting, said Frampton. I hope you don't mind the open window, said Mrs. Sappleton briskly. Briskly means in a very hasty manner, very fast, quick way. My husband and brothers will be home directly from shooting and they always come in this way. They have been out for snip in the marshes today, so they will make a fine mess over my poor carpets. So like human folk, isn't it? So she's telling that my brothers and my husband will be coming after the shoot through this way only, and they have gone out for a shooting purpose into the marshes. Snip means cut with small quick strokes. So there are bushes, they have to go through the bushes by rapid movement of their hands, and the land is very marshy, very muddy. So they'll be entering into the house and they will make a total mess of the carpet here. That's why she has kept the window open so that she can save the carpet that is there in the room. So with this, Frampton Nuttall gets little nervous because he knows that these three people are already dead 3 years back and this poor lady is waiting for their return. Now he has developed some sympathy towards Mrs. Sappleton. She rattled on cheerfully about the shooting and the scarcity of birds and the prospects for ducks in the winter. Okay, so rattle means she went on. She kept on talking very happily about the shooting and how birds are getting less in numbers and about the prospects of duck in the winter. She kept on talking happily and he was feeling sympathetic towards Sampleton. To Frampton, it was all purely horrible. He made a desperate but only partially successful effort to turn the talk onto a less ghastly topic. Ghastly topic means a topic that causes great horror. So he tried desperately, that is, hopelessly he tried many a times to divert Mrs. Sampleton's mind towards something else so that she stops thinking about her dead family members. He was conscious that his hostess was giving him only a fragment of her attention, and her eyes were constantly straying past him to the open window and the lawn beyond. And he was very much aware that Mrs. Sampleton is hardly attending him. She is into her own world and her eyes were straying, moving past him towards the window and the lawn, just eagerly waiting for the return of these dead people. It was certainly an unfortunate coincidence that he should have paid his visit on this tragic anniversary, and he was feeling very sorry that he came to visit Mrs. Sampleton on such a tragic day when these people actually lost their life. The doctors agree in ordering me complete rest, an absence of mental excitement, and avoidance of anything in the nature of violent physical exercise, announced Frampton. And Frampton, in order to divert the mind of Mrs. Sampleton from the waiting of the people who are already dead towards some other topic. So he said that my doctors have said that I should take complete rest and I should not undergo any mental stress and I should avoid any kind of rigorous physical exercise. Who labored under the tolerably widespread delusion. Tolerably means that is something endurable or that is bearable, and delusion means false impression, that total strangers and chance acquaintances are hungry for the least detail of one's ailments and infirmities. Ailments and infirmities means complaints of sickness, their cause and cure. So this doubt is there in his mind that how these strangers, and that is natural, that the strangers who are not very much aware of you, who are not very friendly with you, will hardly have any interest in your ailment, your kind of ailment, your complaints, and what would be the cause and cure. On the matter of the diet, they are not so much in agreement, he continued. He said that my doctors don't agree on one particular kind of diet. No, said Mrs. Sampleton, in a voice which only replaced a yawn at the last moment. So she said no, but she had no interest at all in any kind of discussion with Sampleton. Her sound just ended up in a yawn. Then she suddenly brightened into alert attention, but not to what Frampton was saying. Then immediately she just got alert with something, but for sure it was not towards Frampton's discussions. Here they are at last, she cried. And she shouted that they have come back. And Frampton was just awestruck. How is it possible? How dead people can come? She cried, just in time for tea, and don't they look as if they were muddy up to the eyes? And she said they are just right on time for the tea. But see how they are muddy. They are totally into mud up to their eyes. Frampton shivered slightly and turned towards the niece with a look intended to convey sympathetic comprehension. Sympathetic comprehension means understanding and showing sympathy. So he just turned towards the niece, just in a way to convey that he understands what Mrs. Sampleton is undergoing, and just to show the sympathy. The child was staring out through the open window with a dazed horror in her eyes. When he looked at Vera, she too was looking outside the window in horror. In a chill of nameless fear, Frampton swung round in his seat and looked in the same direction. By seeing the expression on this girl's face, he too thought that something is there outside the window. So he also swung round in his chair just to turn back and look what's happening there. In the deepening twilight, 3 figures were walking across the lawn towards the window. They all carried guns under their arms, and one of them was additionally burdened with a white coat hung over his shoulder, just as she narrated that her husband was carrying one waterproof raincoat, white colored, in his hands. A tired brown spaniel kept close at their heels. Noiselessly they neared the house, and then a hoarse young voice chanted out of the dusk, "I say, Bertie, why do you bound?" The same thing what she narrated has come alive in front of Frampton Nuttall. He was totally shocked, in fear. Part 3. What else can Frampton do but beat a hasty retreat? Had he seen a ghost? The niece does have a knack for explaining an uncanny coincidence. Knack means skill. Uncanny coincidence means strange event. Frampton grabbed wildly at his stick and had the hall door, the gravel drive, and the front gate were dimly noted stages in his headlong retreat. Headlong means in a rush, and retreat an act of moving back or withdrawing. So he immediately, in a fear, he was not able to stay any more there. He was so much in horror that he immediately grabbed his stick and hat. He just rushed out of the hall door into the gravel drive. That is gravel drive, the road that is not smooth at all. And keep in mind, his doctors have told him not to take any mental stress, not to do any violent kind of exercise, but he's totally into the stress and he is rushing out of the door just to escape. And the front gate, from the gravel drive he reached to the front gate were dimly noted stages in his rush to just escape from that area. A cyclist coming along the road had to run into the hedge to avoid imminent collision. Hedge means a fence or a boundary. Imminent, about to happen, and collision means crash. So a cyclist was cycling through that road, and by seeing him rush like without any warning, the cyclist had to just go and collide into the hedge or boundary. He just ran into the boundaries just to avoid collision with Frampton Nuttall. "Here we are, my dear," said the bearer of the white mackintosh coming in through the window. So while coming through the window, her husband, the one who was carrying the mackintosh, the raincoat in his hand, as he was entering, he said, "We are coming. We have already reached." Mackintosh means full-length waterproof coat. "Who was that who bolted out as we came up?" Bolted out means leave suddenly. So he is asking, he is inquiring, who was that person? Very strange. He just rushed out as we entered. It's a courtesy to meet somebody when someone comes. "A most extraordinary man, a Mr. Nuttall," said Mrs. Sampleton. So she was telling he is very extraordinary person. He could only talk about his illness. I don't know what kind of person he is. He was throughout talking about his illness. And he dashed off without a word of goodbye or apology when you arrived. One would think he had seen a ghost. So she's telling that as soon as he saw you, he just rushed out of the house without even saying goodbye or any kind of apology, as if he has seen some ghost. This is what Mrs. Sampleton said. Now, the niece is coming into the action. I expect it was a spaniel, said the niece calmly. She's telling, I think it is because of this spaniel dog. He told me he had a horror of dogs. Okay, now you can see immediately she's good enough to frame another story, a make-believe story about Nuttall, Frampton Nuttall, that he has fear of dogs. Just see what story she is fabricating now. He was once hunted into a cemetery somewhere on the banks of the Ganges by a pack of dogs and had to spend the night in a newly dug grave where the creatures snarling and grinning and foaming just above him, enough to make anyone lose their nerves. So the new story that she fabricated now is that once near the Ganges, okay, the holy river, he was just walking near the Ganges and all of a sudden a pack of dogs attacked him, and just to escape from there he had to jump into a newly dug grave. You can imagine spending the whole night in a graveyard is very horrific. One could even lose his nerves, can have heart attack. So whole night he had to spend in that newly dug grave, and the creatures and the dogs were all snarling means growl with bare teeth. Okay, they were growling with their bare teeth and they were grinning and foaming. That is, they very angrily they were barking at him, and this made his nerve lose his nerve. Romance at short notice was her specialty. Romance at short notice means fabricating story on the spot is what the specialty of Vera. I hope by now you understand that Vera was a smart, cunning, extraordinary girl who was good enough in framing stories, and she used to, the way she used to narrate the story, even the adults used to get deceived by her story. Though Mrs. Sampleton was aware of Vera's habit, still she narrated the story in such a way that even Mrs. Sampleton was influenced by the way she narrated the story. If you look out for the meaning of the name Vera, also pronounced as Vera, means true. The meaning of the word name Vera is true. But here, Vera, whose name is ironic since she rarely speaks truth. Vera is capable of blurring the lines between imagination and reality, sanity and insanity. Her story about the males of the Sampleton family who went hunting and were lost resides between truth and fiction. The moral that we draw from the lesson, The Open Window by H. Munro, is that one should not deceive another person. We should be sensitive towards a person's needs and circumstances.